How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today my cheap Lamborghini's turbochargers are getting a huge makeover. Just try to ignore the planks of wood, they're temporary. So if you guys are new to my channel, then thank you so much for showing up, and I hope you guys really like what I'm doing with this project. Now, this project should be at the jump-off point in the next few days or so, hopefully, if nothing else goes wrong. But if you guys aren't new to my channel and you guys are part of my notification squad, then big shout out to every single one of you, likely writing in the comments first, second, first, and in before the first, I don't know, 20 views or something. But for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, this is my 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider, and I am working on it. I have been working on it for the last few weeks, taking it apart, putting it back together again, and now we are modifying it to make sure that it makes a ton of power. And when I say a ton of power, I mean more than 1,000 horsepower. We want that 4-figure horsepower goal to be in this car. And I think we can make it, but not without some help. Now, you guys know that I've enlisted the help of a viewer and now a friend to me. His name is Tony. He is the welding Jedi. He knows his stuff about metal fabrication, about welding, obviously. He's taken a very well-deserved day off from this project. We will be resuming it tomorrow, and you guys will see it in the next episode. This is gonna be a chance for me in the car to bond. So I haven't actually done much work on the car on my own without Tony's help in quite a while, so maybe I'm getting a little rusty. Rusty is a good word to use because I'm actually going to tackle the rust on these turbochargers. So these are the turbochargers that are going to be adding a lot of power to my Lamborghini's V10. These are twin Borg-Warner EFR 8374 turbochargers. And they are pretty good at what they do. They have internal wastegates, they have internal blow-off valves. Everything is in one easy to control unit. You don't need a bunch of external wastegates and blow-off valves and all that stuff. Even the oiling, it's all self-regulated, which is really cool. There's no need for restrictors or anything like that. It's a very high-tech turbo system. However, this car has been sitting for 3 years before I got it. And when a car's been sitting, it doesn't really bode well for the mechanical components, especially the ones that are made of iron. The ones that are made of iron, like this, the center turbo housing. These center turbo housings have rusted pretty good. A lot of you have been telling me to do something with this, and I agree that was the plan from the beginning. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off these turbochargers and I'm going to remove this rust with the wire wheel. But before I do that, I want to do something that a lot of you have been sending me messages about. Basically, I've gotten literally hundreds of messages about this, and no matter how many times I explain it, it just keeps coming back because people either don't hear me say it, or maybe somebody gets confused or something like that. So it is the orientation of the turbos. Now, turbos are basically a spinning wheel of sorts. It's a center shaft and it spins very, very rapidly. Now, everything rotates on this wheel, on this axis rather. So that includes the center housing. The center housing has to be clocked in a certain way because the oil has to come in and has to leave through certain orifices in this turbo housing. Now, this turbo housing, when I was mocking it all up, it's not correctly clocked, meaning that it's not at the right angle where it should be. This is in a really bad spot because this is the oil drain, and the oil drain is supposed to be pointing downward. The good thing about these turbos is that you can clock them in any orientation you want. Well, almost any orientation you want. You want this to be as close to down as possible. So I think before we do any of the metal work, any of the metal cleanup work, we have to clock these turbos correctly. And for that, we have to take them off. So let's get to that. Alright, so we have some good news and some not so good news. The good news is that we got both turbos out and everything came apart. They were disassembled pretty easily. Nothing was rusted shut. Nothing gave me a really hard time. The bad news is I'm gonna need a new turbo. And the reason why is because of something that kills turbos very silently and sometimes very catastrophically. It's called foreign object damage. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, foreign object damage is what happens when a chunk of something, usually metal from a not so great weld, comes out of the exhaust pipe at considerable speed and hits the turbo compressor blades here. Actually, this isn't the compressor, it's the turbine blade. So it hits the turbine blade and hits it with such force that it either chips a section off, or it bends it, or it damages it in some way. And that's exactly what we have with this turbo. This is the driver's side turbo. Yeah, right there. You can see that there is a chunk missing out of one of the fins. Now, a lot of people might think that this is okay. You could probably run it like this and it should be fine. That is not the case because these turbos are very, very highly balanced units. These turbos spin anywhere between 50 and 150,000 RPM. So that means that if there's any sort of variation on this end, meaning that if the weight isn't exactly on point, then at 150,000 RPM, this is going to be out of balance. And if anybody knows what a tire looks like when it's out of balance, it does this wobbly effect. That's going to ruin the insides. It's going to ruin the oil passageways. It's going to introduce a lot of wear. And eventually, it can mean that it wears down the entire shaft, and the compressor wheel, the intake side, can actually start eating away into the housing. And then we get metal shavings into the engine, which is really, really not good. So this is a big setback because these turbos, these BorgWarner EFR 8374s, they're not cheap. And they're also not the easiest to find parts for because these have specific turbo parts. Like some more generic turbos, some turbos that have been out for many, many years have parts that you can buy on eBay, have parts that you can buy on Amazon. You can take it to any turbo shop and have them balance it and you should be good to go. This has a titanium turbine wheel, which means that it has to be either cast or I'm not sure how the titanium is made. Maybe it's CNC'd or maybe it's just some other process. I have no idea, but titanium is not exactly the easiest material to come by, and it looks like it's part of the shaft itself. It's not a removable piece. Now the compressor wheel, you can actually find that. You can find that for about $100 or so, but this is part of the shaft, and basically I need a whole new shaft. And I've reached out to somebody in BorgWarner, or at least somebody with a contract with BorgWarner, and they said that they can get me a remanufactured, or rather if I send them this one, they can remanufacture it for around $400, which is fine. But here's the thing. I need to have a turbo on this car. I need to finish this build. I don't know what the turnaround time on this is. Likely a few weeks, and I don't want to have that sort of downtime, especially on something that I really want to start relatively quickly. So I'm gonna have to call around and see what's available, because I do live near Orlando and there are a lot of speed shops, so who knows, I might get lucky. But this is gonna be expensive, and it's not gonna be fun. Good news! I found a turbo. So the great part about living in this part of the country is the fact that there are a lot of speed shops near me, and one of them so happened to have this turbo, the exact turbo that I need. Well, not exactly, but it will definitely fit the bill. This is a BorgWarner EFR 8374, but it has the wrong hot side. This has an .83 AR with a wastegate. I need a .92 AR with a wastegate. But the thing is, these have something called supercores, which means that you can exchange the hot sides, and theoretically it should be exactly the same turbo as this. So let's open it up. Instructions, warranty, we don't need that. I have never actually bought a brand new turbo before, and this is a first for me. Easy does it. There we go. I want to be a little bit careful because this turbo, well, it was $1,600. It was $1,600, and I didn't get any discount off. This was exactly retail price. So, yeah, this is the reality of working on these things. But wow, this is This is quite clean indeed. Well, it should be, it's brand new. Yeah, and I can already tell that the hot side is way smaller. Super small. This is a T3 hot side, and I have a T4 hot side, and it's actually a divided flange, and it shouldn't be, but I'm just gonna run what I brung. What I'm gonna do now is I am going to take this apart and modify it so the center section doesn't rust like my other center sections have. So I got 3 turbos. Not sure what the future of all 3 is going to be. I know 2 of them are going to go on my Lamborghini, but the other one, maybe the Supra? I don't know. We'll see. But for now, I have to take this thing apart, and then I have to start fixing it. I mean, I know it's brand new, but we still have to fix it. We still have to make sure it looks aesthetically pleasing, and then we can put it on the car and see how it looks. I love working on new parts because everything comes apart so easily. There's no rust or anything. It's so awesome. Too bad it's so expensive. So take a look at this. This is what a turbo essentially is. This is the compressor side, and this is the turbine side. So the exhaust comes in here, there's a housing, and this spins up these guys, and that in turn spins this, and this compresses the air going back into the intake. It goes through an intercooler to cool down the charge air because this air does get pretty darn hot. But look at how nice this all looks. It's all nice and shiny and CNC'd. So this is all very well balanced. You can see that this was balanced by hand, and it's a really good piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back. I'll put this back here, being very careful. And I am now going to treat these turbos to a bit of rejuvenation. Now this, although it is brand new, this is going to start to look like this in not too much time because this center section is actually made of cast iron. And iron doesn't exactly have very good rust preventative qualities. It rusts basically instantly. And I don't know why, well, I know why they use cast iron is because it can repel a lot of heat and you know, that sort of thing. But it starts to end up looking like this, and especially with a car that might have elements intrude into the engine bay. There are holes on top of the hood, and there is going to be water that comes down here. So what we're going to do on the turbos that work, which is this one and this one, we're going to treat it with some rust preventative solution. Well, this one not so much. I'm just going to clean this one up. But this we're going to wire wheel down this nasty rust. Then we're going to treat it with some rust preventative solution. I will show you all of that. And then we're gonna paint it. And I'm gonna paint it with a special color, special paint that allows this color to stay this aluminum, but it's also very high heat, and it's very durable. It can go somewhere around 1200 degrees, which is great for a turbocharger. So without further ado, let's get to cleaning this thing up. Let's make this thing look like this thing. All right, so now that both turbos are nice and clean, I'm gonna tell you what I actually used. So this is called POR 15 Metal Prep. And what this does is it gets all the rust, all the surface corrosion, and it turns it into a paintable surface. And this is also like a primer because we're gonna be using a very high heat, well, high temperature paint. And the paint we're gonna be using is this. It's called POR 15 High Temp. A lot of you guys will already know what this is. So this has been used in rusty undercarriages. I actually used it on my Lexus SE400 a few, well, more than a few episodes ago. And this is good for stuff under the car, stuff in, like, say, a bed liner situation, and it's also good on frames. But it's also good on very high heat applications. And right here, this is not the usual black. This is actually aluminum. There's a lot of glare actually right now. But this is aluminum, and hopefully this matches this finish, and it's gonna make sure that these turbos look brand new. Before I put any of this paint on, I am gonna have to mask off some of these areas, namely the oil feed and return holes. I'm gonna be using a brush. So instead of spray painting it so I get a lot of overspray, just gonna use a brush and have very fine control. So I don't know how excited you guys are to watch paint dry, but that's what we're gonna be doing. So yeah, let's do it. Okay, so while that paint is drying, I am gonna work on the compressor housings. Now these compressor housings are from the, well, the turbos that came from the car, because the new one doesn't have this black wrinkle finish. But it's actually not that bad. I'm not too enthusiastic about it. I don't think it looks all that great, but it doesn't look horrible. However, I don't think it matches anything on the car right now. What would match it is a nice white, and I think that would give these things an air of quality. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did on my intake manifold cover, and we're gonna do the same thing on this. So basically, we're gonna give all this a very light dusting of white paint, but I'm not gonna use just any white paint. I'm gonna use some flame-proof, it looks like, yeah, it's paint for headers. And this is for very, very high temperatures. Now, turbos do get to very, very high temperatures, but it's not gonna be that high. I mean, this goes from 1300 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not getting anywhere near that with these turbos, but it should be good nonetheless. So we're just gonna use this, but before that, we're gonna clean it up with some brake cleaner, and after that, we're gonna use some adhesion promoter, and this basically acts like a primer. It's sort of like a glue for the paint, and that means that we'll get some really, really good coverage. And to make sure that we don't get paint in the places where we don't want it, I'm just gonna use some regular masking tape and mask off any of these exposed holes. So this should be pretty quick, but it's gonna look pretty awesome when we're done. And here is the finished product. Check this out. Now, I don't want to touch it too much because my hands are super dirty, but this is our new painted compressor cover, and compressor housing rather, it's not a cover. And you'll notice that I left a little bit of the black still on here, just because I'm going to be cutting off this flange, and then we're going to be covering it up with some silicone couplers. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm also not concerned about this. The metal isn't exactly the most clean in the world, but we can clean it up a little later on. And this is also going to be covered up by a coupler, and the air filter is going to go on here. But I'm not done yet. Well, I'm going to be done for the purposes of this video, but I'm not done with this process because this is high heat paint. So what high heat paint actually needs is for it to cure properly, and for that we need actual heat. Now, I can't turn on the car and put this on there because, well, the car is not ready yet. But what I'm going to do, probably tomorrow or whenever I get around to it, is put this in the oven. Now, I'm not going to put the whole turbo in the oven, but I'm just going to put this compressor housing in there. The instructions did say wait 24 hours for it to cure. You can handle it in about 3 hours, which is fine, and it's doable by anybody. And I am really, really digging this. I still have to put the other turbo completely together. This is part of it. I have to put the compressor housing on there, and I have to put the turbine housing, and then we will have two refurbished and no longer rusting turbos. That is a really good thing, and especially because we spend like no money. This was like $10, and it's gonna make my car look and hopefully perform really well. So that is it for this video, and I hope you guys liked it. If you'd like to contact me for any reason, you can do so at The Real Tavarish. That is Instagram and Twitter. Facebook.com/AskTavarish and AskTavarish@gmail.com is my email. I know I'm going to get plenty of emails about this and my turbo setup and whatnot, but I will be answering more questions in the next video when I actually have more work on the turbo system. Well, more work other than aesthetically, sort of. If you'd like to buy a shirt that lets you know and lets everybody else know, well, you'll already know, but it lets everybody else know that you are the warranty, you can buy this shirt in my Teespring store down below. If you'd like to listen to me talk about cars with a really good friend named Andrew Howell, then you can check out my Wrench Everyday podcast. I podcast every day at, every weekday at noon Eastern Standard Time, and all that stuff is gonna be in the description below. But until next time, this is me telling you that on cars that now have awesome turbochargers that won't rust, at least for the foreseeable future, you guys need to wrench every day.